it used to be like average cholesterol, total cholesterol was like 220, 230.
Welcome again, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to the Jon Andersen Podcast, and I have got a really, really special guest for you here today. You know, I've known this dude for a while and talk about a knowledgeable guy, and we're going to have a conversation on a topic that is very, very misunderstood. But before I tell you what that is, I want to welcome Mr. Shawn Baker, actually Dr. Shawn Baker, to the podcast. How are you, brother?
Yeah, I'm good, John. It's good seeing you again. It's likewise. I've always enjoyed your content, and you are certainly inspirational in many ways. For as you, I think you're over 50 now, like me. I'm about to touch 60, so I'm still grinding. You know, like you know, we've had sort of competed in some of the same sports over the years. I did strongman and powerlifting and rugby and all that stuff, and now I'm trying to get in. I'm trying to get fast, man. I'm trying to work on sprinting. So
well, that's what I just sent you a text. I was like, dude, some of the stuff you look like you're doing looks like, that's why I text you. I was like, dude, you're rocking over there. How's that stuff going? So yeah, the stuff that you do.
I've got my first track meet. I've got my first track meet next week. So it'll be
really,
I'll run the 100 for the first time, and give me a starting place to kind of know where I'm at. And then as I get to 60, I've got some goals I'd like to hit. And so it's fun training. It's fun training for a new sport because, once you like you said, you've bodybuilded forever, and I was a world champion rower, and I've already, I've kind of maxed out what I'm going to do on that. And so now I'm like, it's fun. You start obsessing over something new, and it's just, I just find it, once an athlete, once a competitive athlete, you can't get away from that in many ways.
Exactly. That's total. You can't get it out of you. That's it. Well, brother, we want to talk. I want to have you. You're such a knowledgeable dude, and obviously you're a doctor. So when you speak, it becomes a little bit more of a holy grail, so to speak, because especially the way that people listen to people that are highly qualified with education. So I want you to kind of talk about cholesterol. That's really going to be our topic because it's so misunderstood. And obviously we know if like I tell my clients, I say, don't listen to me, just go start digging around. You're going to find some really interesting stuff about cholesterol, how they recently lowered the levels before they brought in the statins and all this kind of stuff. So I guess long and short, just kind of talk to us about cholesterol. It's let everybody understand what it is, what it's not. And, the elements that we actually need, they're healthy elements to it that most people tend to not understand.
Yeah, well, cholesterol, we've been kind of studying cholesterol about 120 years. I mean, it was first noted that if you fed like rabbits a super high fat diet, they would develop heart disease. And then they later figured out it had to do with, theoretically about raising cholesterol levels. And even though we've been studying it for well over a century, it's still controversial. It's just one molecule, and still people debate about its goodness, its badness, what it does, what it doesn't do. And we know, obviously cholesterol is essential for life. We make our own. About 80% of the cholesterol that's floating around in our blood is made by our liver. The remaining can be contributed from the diet. Without cholesterol, we would all be dead. Every single membrane in our body depends upon it. Most of our hormones are built on a cholesterol backbone. There are diseases like multiple sclerosis. You cannot and one of the problems with multiple sclerosis is we have this demyelination of the nerves. The nerves are, if you think about nerves like wires, there's the actual nerve itself, and it's covered in this insulation called myelin, a myelin sheath. And in multiple sclerosis, that myelin gets destroyed. The only way you can repair that in both animal and human studies have been shown is by having exogenous cholesterol. That is, in other words, dietary cholesterol helps that. And what I see is people with MS going on things like a carnivore diet or a ketogenic diet often see improvement. Now, we have seen that higher cholesterol levels can be associated with heart disease. I think that relationship is accurate. I think it does occur. However, it is becoming more and more clear that it's conditional. That is to say, it is a dependent variable. So there was a recent study that was just published like 3 days ago that was looking at people with high blood pressure and looking at their risk for cardiovascular disease, whether they're going to get a heart attack or a stroke or drop dead. And what they found was that in that situation, underlying inflammation was the driver. The worst situation was somebody who had inflammation and high cholesterol. They had a higher rate of heart disease. But when they took the inflammation out, the cholesterol became essentially a non-factor. And we've seen that over and over again. There was a nice study out of Denmark done about 3 years ago where they looked at, I don't know.
Can I ask you a quick question right there? When you say
Sure.
take the inflammation out, could that be related to sugar?
Yeah. I mean, if we look at what is driving inflammation in our body, I mean, diet does impact that. Some people would argue it's ultra processed food. It might be sugary foods. It might be stress related. It might be pollution related. So there's a lot of things that drive inflammation. But if you can reduce inflammation significantly, then it seems like, and again, this is still a controversial statement. The science isn't solidified around this, but it is starting to solidify that if you can remove the inflammation and the metabolic dysfunction, diabetes, prediabetes, hypertension, obesity, then the cholesterol becomes less and less relevant. And for some people, like I said, there is a very controversial study right now that is still in progress, and they've released some of the preliminary data on people on a ketogenic diet with ridiculously high cholesterol. We're talking LDL cholesterol 400, 500, 600, and when a lot of people are saying we want it below 100, right? These people with cholesterol at levels never really been seen or tested before in a healthy population are turning out that their level of cardiovascular disease is not any more increased than really any other population, given, and some of those people have no cardiovascular disease. So it's interesting, and this study is still evolving. They're looking at more data on this. We'll get some more long-term data in the coming, and in fact, I think this month, in August, they're going to release another batch of data on that particular cohort. So I think that, if you have high cholesterol, you should not just ignore it and say, well, I'm lean and healthy and there's nothing else. What it seems to be is that imaging can be very helpful. And what do I mean by imaging? Cardiac imaging with something called a coronary artery calcium scan is a basic test. This is just a basic quick, like kind of an x-ray of the heart. They use it, done in a CT scan, and they look for any calcium. Calcium occurs when there's been kind of longer standing cardiovascular disease. You can get more sophisticated than that, do what was called an angiography, a CT guided angiogram, or CT analyzed angiogram, CCTA. So those things will really distinguish who's at risk and who's not. And so I think as someone who is over 40, anyone over 40 should probably get some cardiac imaging. You can get a CAC score for $100-$150. You don't even need a doctor to do it. So that would be what I think would be step one for everybody. So you can get at least some clarity as to where you stand up to this point. For instance, I had one in my early 50s. Mine was 0, no heart disease, despite eating, years and decades of eating tons of meat and tons of animal products and being on a ketogenic diet for a long period of time. And then, obviously I do a lot of things that are healthy. I sleep well, I exercise, I train, I don't eat garbage, I don't smoke, I don't drink. I just, so I mean, you would expect someone like me to generally be at lower risk for cardiovascular disease. And it's not, but the other thing about cholesterol is we know that it has a function in the body. It's not just there randomly. Yes. It does stuff, right? And so it participates in our immune function. It participates in, obviously, hormone production. It participates in the maintenance of the structural integrity of every cell in our body. And so when you start to see cholesterol falling, this is an interesting thing. When people get sick, like they have a heart attack or they have cancer, their cholesterol drops. Partly because it's probably being utilized, it's being used up, and then your body can't keep pace with the damage that's ongoing. So some people will see this, I'll call this sort of they'll say reverse causality, that, the reason so many old people with low cholesterol die early is because they're already sick. They've already got heart disease. They've already got cancer. They've already got.
That's interesting. I never knew that.
Yeah. So we see that. And so some people will say that because of that, it's not the low cholesterol is killing them, it's the disease that's making the cholesterol go down. And there's probably some truth to that. But the other thing we've seen many, many times, there was a great study Huge study out of Korea. They looked at 12 million people. That's a huge study.
Yeah, that's
because,
massive.
they have a very streamlined healthcare system where all the data is easily accessible. So they look at 12 million people, and they found that the people that lived the longest had a total cholesterol between 210 and 240. Total cholesterol,
Wow.
which is considered high by all
Yeah, oh,
conventional
yeah.
Western standards. Typically they want it under 190, and some people like it, below 150. So there's that sort of conundrum. It's like, why are these people living longer? There was a huge study out of Hawaii where they found the same thing. All the people that lived over 100 had, or they tended to have a higher cholesterol level. So there are now drugs out there that can get your cholesterol effectively to zero. I mean, literally, they can get it down below 20 if they want to. And yet there have been case reports of people with cholesterol below 20 still having heart attacks. So it's like, what is going on here? So it's kind of one of those things where I'm not the guy that's going to say ignore cholesterol and high cholesterol is good. I'm the guy that says there's a lot of nuance around this. And I think metabolic health is probably a bigger determinant of, disease and cardiovascular risk.
So that's kind of, granted, because it's like we've got a lot of experience in terms of like, I've been in the industry a long time. There's so many things that have changed and all this. And one of the things that I've, recognized is there's a big difference between the guy who has high cholesterol and he sleeps well, just like you were describing. He sleeps well, he eats well, he exercises. That guy having a higher cholesterol is a little different than a guy who's laying on the couch eating Cheetos that has a hard time getting up to take a piss. And I think that's something that people tend to not realize, that there's cholesterol, cholesterol in different types of creatures it's almost a different set of risks, correct?
Yeah. So here's a funny analogy. It's funny. It's an interesting observation in nature. And again, this is, this is an animal type thing. So a lot of people will have to put that caveat there. So bears have incredibly high cholesterol, black bears, brown bears, things that while they're hibernating, and a bear will hibernate 5, sometimes 6 months out of the year, depending where they live, with, total cholesterol above 400. They never, ever get heart disease. It's like unheard of for a bear to have heart disease. And the reason they postulate is, well, because bears have these special blood vessels that have these things called proteoglycans, which are, proteins with a little bit of sugar attached to it. And in the human, we have these same proteoglycans, and the proteoglycans actually capture some of the plaque particles and allow them to progress. But the reason is because a bear will, what do they do before they hibernate? They gorge on food. They eat a bunch of salmon. They eat a bunch of berries. They get fatten up for the winter, and then they sleep all winter. And so where is their energy coming from? Their energy is all coming from their fat, because they can't eat while they're asleep, right? And so the same thing starts to happen in humans when they go on low carb diets. Their energy is coming from, in a lot of cases, depending on what, how much food they're eating, but a lot of times it's their own body fat. And we'll see that their cholesterol will rise up in that situation as well. But you're absolutely right in the fact that comparing a sick couch potato fat dude with a dad bod, that's inflamed, that's drinking beer and just big old belly,
just no care for his health.
Yeah, they're completely different animals. And the problem is, most of the data around heart disease is on sick people that don't take care of themselves. And yes, what we see is in that situation, high cholesterol is clearly not beneficial. It's likely problematic. But we don't have a lot of data on, young, fit, well, not young, just fit guys and gals that take care of themselves, walk around at a relatively normal body fat level or low body fat level, that are healthy, that are physically fit. We have almost no data on those people when it comes to heart disease, because they don't typically have a lot of heart attacks. I mean, we always hear about that one guy. Oh, there's that one guy, that trainer that died of a heart attack. But but it's newsworthy. Why does it make the news? Is because it's so damn rare. If you go to any cardiologist clinic, all it is a bunch of fat, overweight, obese people, mostly. I mean, there's a few skinny ones. I mean, but they're all, pre-diabetic, diabetic, inflammatory disease. Inflammation and stress are another big driver of cardiovascular disease. If you have inflammation in the body, driven by maybe too much sugar in the diet, maybe too much processed garbage in the diet, or you have some sort of autoimmune inflammatory disease, rheumatoid arthritis, Crohn's disease, your risk for cardiovascular disease is much, much higher. than somebody, even with somebody with high cholesterol.
Yeah, I'm going to say, because I mean, there's a list of reasons of why someone would have a heart attack. Cholesterol is not the only one. You know?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at, there was a nice study that came out in 2021. I think it was a Women's Health Initiative, when they longitudinally looked at about 60,000 women, and they rank ordered what were the big factors for developing heart disease. Number one was diabetes. Unequivocally, it was like 10x, right? It's like it increased your risk by tenfold. Number two was like metabolic syndrome, which is kind of like pre-diabetes, hypertension, obesity, high triglycerides, high glucose. And then after that, it was obesity. And then after that, it was, I think, smoking. And then I think, lower down the list, you get into a little bit of family history, and then high triglycerides. And then really at the bottom of that list was elevated LDL cholesterol. It was like, whereas diabetes was a 10x factor, this was like a 0.3 factor. It was like a slight increase. So there are far more important things to chase than your cholesterol. Now, the problem is we as physicians.
That's a great way to put it. I like that. There are far better things to chase than your cholesterol. Because if you think about it, it's almost like cholesterol is given this thing. There's so much attention given to it. It's taking away from all the other stuff that we should be giving, or the average person should be giving attention to.
Right. And it's because, I mean, quite frankly, it's because it was enormously profitable to do so. I mean, more than $1 trillion of sales on lipid-lowering therapy have been done through the statin era from the late 1980s until now. They've made more than $1 trillion. They've got other drugs, new lipid-lowering drugs like PCSK9 inhibitors and some of these other drugs that are out there now. They're going to make some money off of that still. But now what we're seeing is, you're probably aware of these GLP-1 drugs, the GLP-1 agonists, the Ozempics, the Mounjaros, and the second and third generation ones that are coming are now the big money makers. These are the new $1 trillion drugs. So what you can bet your damn bottom, you can take this to the bank. There are going to be more and more people that are going to be interested in using those drugs to claim that they're going to protect you from heart disease. And to some degree, they probably will to a degree, but the whole messaging is always going to be based around what's going to make the most money, right? And so we lived through the era of the lowering cholesterol was the most important thing. Now people are saying, oh, well, if we just put you on this other lifelong chronic medication, then we can also impact it because it's going to make money.
It's so perfect. Lifelong chronic medication. Is that not our medical field, or in terms of the big pharma? How can we get you on a medicine that you need to take for the rest of your life?
Right. Yeah. And it's with obesity, that's the same thing they're saying. They're saying, well, obesity is a disease and you need a medicine to be on it for the rest of your life. And no one would suggest that you come off your high blood pressure medicine because you're supposed to take that for the rest of your life. And we swallowed that hook, line, and sinker when I literally see people coming off high blood pressure meds every single day just by fixing their damn diet. So it's one of those things where they have just sort of brainwashed the population and think, I just need to be on a drug for the rest of my life. And it is a very lucrative and a very successful business model. In fact, Goldman Sachs, the big financial institution, was asked about 3 or 4 years ago, hey, does it make sense financially to cure disease? And they came back with, absolutely, it does not make financial sense to cure disease. So all drugs that are being developed today are being developed with the mindset of, you're going to take this drug for the rest of your life, every week, every month, every year, whatever it might be, every day, depending on the frequency. And that's where all the money is being poured into, because they want to get an ROI like any other company that wants to be successful. We want a return on our investment, and it does not make sense for us to cure disease. Therefore, we're going to convince you that you need to be on drugs for the rest of your life. And that's your best option. The physicians have largely bought into that. As you know, I'm a physician. I was part of that system for years until I kind of had a change in perspective on this stuff. And that's why I push so hard about nutrition and lifestyle and sleep and exercise and not being sedentary. Those things are going to be more successful over the long haul if you just do it. But the hard part is getting people to actually want to do it and do it.
Yep. 100%. So Doc, if you could, I kind of touched on it, but realistically, what I touched on was kind of more of what I heard. I don't really have the exact facts or data, if you will. But we know that when the statins came in, there was a big change in how they viewed cholesterol. It was ultimately so they could prescribe more of this medicine. What exactly did happen?
Well, I think, and there's an interesting book. It's written by a guy named Malcolm Kendrick. It's called The Clot Thickens. And he says that, up until like through the mid, the 70s, early 80s, mid 80s, they didn't really have an idea what was causing heart disease. They were looking at a couple different options because they had tried lowering cholesterol before and it didn't work. Like there was all these drugs that predated statins that would lower cholesterol, but it never made a difference. And so it's like, well, if all these other drugs lowered your cholesterol, but the heart disease didn't get better, why are statins doing? There is something called a pleiotropic effect. That is to say that the statins may decrease the risk of heart disease because they have a mild anti-inflammatory effect. And a lot of people think that's a real issue. But prior to that, all these drug companies were working on different solutions to heart disease. Some were looking at maybe it's a blood clot problem. We have this clotting system in our body. And sometimes if we have a little bit of arterial damage, the body attempts to form a little bit of a clot to slow things down. And Malcolm Kendrick believed that was really kind of the initiating event for cardiovascular disease. And there were some companies working on that aspect. But then, and I don't remember which company it was, it might have been Merck, it might have been one of the other ones that came out with the first statin. And they published some aggressive data that was probably manipulated in some degree. You have to realize most of the drug studies that were published, certainly many, many years ago, were not really peer-reviewed correctly. They would often hide their data. They would manipulate their data. They wouldn't share it with the peer reviewers, and they would market it. And they say, oh, well, we've shown that we can reduce heart disease by 20% in our clinical trial, whatever the number was. And so then all the other companies said, oh my God, these guys are going to kill it, make a bunch of money. So then they all abandoned all the other research avenues and said, okay, we're all in on statins.
No shit.
So
it was literally following the money.
Of course. Yeah, of course. That's how it was.
Literally to the T. I mean, we know that that's the case, but it was just that simple. That was the turning point right there.
That was, but yeah. And again, if you read the book, The Clot Thickens by Malcolm Kendrick, it goes into the history of that in a little more detail. And I can't remember specifically, but essentially that's what happened. They said that we find that this is a very potentially profitable drug. We can reliably lower your cholesterol, and it's interesting. The average cholesterol in the United States has actually gone down. It used to be like average cholesterol, total cholesterol was like 220, 230. It's now down to about 200. So we've successfully, on a population scale, dropped our cholesterol by about 20, 25 points, which is huge, on a population level. And yet the incidence of cardiovascular disease has not really changed. Now, we're better at saving people that get heart attacks than we used to be. We have all these advanced resuscitation techniques and things like that. So people don't die as much from heart disease as they used to, but the incidence really hasn't improved much. Now, some of that has improved because we quit smoking as much. Back in 1954, 45% of Americans smoked. Now that number is down around like 13%. We've dropped it dramatically. So a lot of people say, well, the only reason the heart disease has improved is because of the lack of smoking. Because certainly we're fatter, certainly we're more diabetic than we were 50 years ago. I mean, that's clearly the case. Yeah.
Isn't that the truth? The kind of funny side note, what a PE class used to look like, say in the 50s and 60s, and what a PE class looks like today, there's no resemblance in terms of our kids of today. It's crazy, So
go ahead.
Go ahead.
No,
I want to hear what you have to say. Everything you have to say. I'm just soaking it up.
When it comes to kids, I mean, I don't think you should be able to leave the educational system without physical competence.
I agree with that.
When I see like older people, and I'm in that old category now as I'm pushing 60, the fact that many people can't jump, they can't sprint, they can't do a simple squat or something like that is embarrassing. And many of them have never done it their whole life. I mean, they're learning to exercise for the first time in their life in their 50s because they got through high school and they opted out of PE, or no one actually.
I never thought about it like that, Doc. Because obviously we come from a generation where this was just the way it was. Now, oh my God, you are getting people in adulthood that have never exercised ever in any form.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing.
Wow, that just blew it's just like peeled my cap. Holy shit!
And you think about what distinguishes people, irrespective of what diet you follow or believe in, what is the biggest discriminator between people that age well and are healthier, people that train, that work out, that exercise, that get out there and get stronger, get faster, get quicker, that move. That is the biggest discriminator. And most of us, because we now live in a society, you think about how can I get through society with just sitting on my ass? I mean, I don't even have to, I don't even have to get up to I don't even have to drive to the store to get food anymore. I can literally just go on my phone and swipe, and some guy's going to bring food to my doorstep. I mean, we've gone from having to run around and kill mammoths to sitting on our ass swiping left on the phone to survive. And some people say it's progress, and yeah, I get that. So I mean, I'm glad I don't sleep in a cave, but I mean, at the same point, where do you draw the line on that ridiculous stuff? I mean, we don't even, pretty soon with AI, we're not even going to need a brain. I mean, it's just like, we're becoming like, if you go to the bottom of the ocean and you look at the fish down there, they don't have eyes. Why don't they have eyes? Because it's pitch darkness. They don't need them. So we are losing so much of our physical capacity. When I was an orthopedic surgeon practicing, people would come to me and they say, "Hey doc, I got a bad knee and my back hurts, and I'm 50 pounds overweight. Can you please write me a prescription for a mobility scooter? So they can just drive around, scoot around the grocery store and drive around their neighborhood." And I would say, absolutely no, absolutely not. I think that's a mobile coffin is what that is.
Yeah.
And,
guaranteed.
It's like, it's just going to accelerate your demise. And a lot
of the last little bit of walking that you're forced to do, now you want a prescription so you don't have to do it.
Exactly. And that's what, and we facilitate that. The fact that we have people, not walking around, driving around at 400, 500, 600 pounds, that never would have been possible 100 years ago. 150. No. If you would have been in society 200 years ago and you weighed 700 pounds, no way you'd live. You would be dead.
No.
And now that we facilitate that, we provide, the medical system has basically hastened those people's existence. I mean, we created that. I mean, that monster.
Yeah.
And not that I'm trying to individually criticize anybody, but I'm just saying that would never have been possible without modern medicine intervening and sort of facilitating that existence. And like I said, at some point you got to say, look, I can't live like this anymore. It's actually killing me.
So let's go to beef and eggs. Okay. Yep. Obviously we're both big beef eaters. I eat tons of eggs. These two foods, you correct me if I'm wrong, got to be at the top of the list of what's going to kill us to the average person. Like when people say, well, what do you eat? I mean, first question is, what do you bench? And then after I get past that dumb thing, they say, what do I eat? And I say a lot of beef and eggs. Oh my goodness. You aren't you afraid you're going to die? So help the public understand that eating, but I mean, first thing, they have no idea that whole foods is a category all by itself, right? The food they're eating out of a box is so much worse than beef and eggs, but help the general public understand how food like this, yes, there is a cholesterol element, and yes, it's going to raise your cholesterol, but help them understand it's not just going to choke you out like a boa constrictor, like the general public thinks it's going to.
Well, I mean, first of all, it's not a given that it will raise your cholesterol. And in many cases, eating a diet that is primarily consisting of beef and eggs and other whole foods, it might actually lower your cholesterol in many cases, even despite eating massive amounts of fat, including saturated fat and cholesterol. That really starts to rear its, I don't even want to say its ugly head, but that becomes more an issue as people get leaner and leaner. That's what the literature seems to show now. There was a really nice paper came out in January of 2024 by a guy named Adrian Sotomoda, who looked at 41 randomized control trials and did a meta-analysis of that. And they found that the biggest driver of elevated cholesterol in people eating lots of meat, eggs, and basically a low-carb diet was how lean they got. So the leaner you get, the higher your cholesterol sometimes go. And there's something called the lipid energy model that seems to account for that. But as far as, if we look at what is the purpose of nutrition, why do I eat in the first place? Well, I have to have essential amino acids. I have to have essential fats. I have to have calories and energy. I need minerals and vitamins, and I need water, arguably. That is it. That is the whole reason you eat. Yeah, I mean, that is the purpose of nutrition for the human being. Now, a lot of us eat because of boredom, because it tastes good, because, social pressure, because of marketing, because of all this crap that we consume. And, the way most people make their nutrition decision is, what does it cost? What does it taste like? and we have this huge system of really good tasting, cheap food. That is the problem here in America and the rest of the Western society. We've got this overabundance of garbage, which is low nutrition quality. As a, and I know this is very simplistic, and I make this sort of statement. A lot of people think I'm nuts about it, but we've always heard about you are what you eat, right? I mean, and you look at like most guys that are strong and muscular that are basically made out of a lot of protein, eat a lot of protein. I mean, we know that. I mean, protein is clearly an important aspect of building muscle. How much is debatable, but we got to have some. But it's like when we look at like every animal on the planet, all the species of animals that there are, and there are, millions of species. But if we look at like all of the like mammals and other animals, something like 80% of them have been carnivorous. Why is that? Because it is a more simple way to solve a problem. Let's just say, for instance, John, I wanted to build a brick house, right? I'm going to build this brick house. If I got a bunch of bricks, that job is a lot easier, right? If I got straw and mud, I could make it, but it would take a lot longer to be less efficient. That's how I look at animal products, animal proteins, animal fats are basically what we're made out of. And so when we're trying to reproduce this and sort of, get the right ingredients, it's not a coincidence that every essential amino acid that we have, all 8 or 9, depending on what, conditions you're talking about, every one of those, the ratio of amino acids is found perfectly in a hunk of meat, in eggs and things like that. Everything we need, we get enough leucine, lysine, methionine, all these things are there.
I mean, I always say it's so much easier for your body to build muscle out of muscle. It's just it's just like simple transition. And then obviously the whole egg, what is it? Correct me if I'm wrong. I think the only thing it's missing is vitamin C in terms of like a complete food, complete protein. Is that correct?
Yeah, eggs are
the whole egg. Crazy.
You think about it. I mean, you've obviously got the white, which is, as you know, is a lot of good source of protein. Yeah. The yolk has everything that a baby chicken needs to grow. So every ingredient that animal needs to develop is contained within that bolus of food there. So that's how they grow. So yeah, eggs are wonderful food. I think I know there's some people that are concerned about vitamin A levels. I don't find that to be particularly problematic for the vast majority of people. So yeah, I mean, eggs are great. Beef is great. Fish is great. I mean, I like I said, my preference, and people always tell me, well, why don't you eat more carbs and stuff like that? I did that years ago. I've done that over time, and I do better without them just for whatever reason. And I perform at a pretty high level.
I'm the same way, Doc.
Yeah,
I am the same exact way. I mean, it's like we know our bodies well, and we know that I feel the best. I perform the best. I mean, there's times when I have to use carbohydrate, like say when I'm going on a bodybuilding stage, I need to use the carbohydrate to fill out the muscle. And I do it because it's part of it, but I don't feel well. It doesn't make me feel well. It just helps me gain that plump muscle look, so to speak, but I'm totally agree with you. I think most people kind of misunderstand, how the body can operate with or without their carbohydrate. I think, let's touch on that a little bit. The carbohydrate can be used as a tool or a crutch. And I think so many people get stuck with the idea that, I just have to have my carbohydrate or I can't function. That sounds like a drug addict, doesn't it?
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of you will do what you're accustomed to. And I see a lot of people, they may transition over a low carb diet for a little while and they feel bad because they're used to performing, and maybe they have 2, 3, 4 decades of using carbohydrates, and they're cheap and they're reliable. And we know the physiological, and we know how to predict the physiological response to that. But I mean, it's really, it's interesting, the literature coming out, because we used to think it was about, performance was associated with glycogen fullness. And it's turning out that it seems to be less about glycogen and more about blood glucose levels. And so it's being shown that for like activities under an hour, and that's largely, like when I train, I usually train, I'm not doing long, 1 hour long continuous exercise. I mean, in the gym, if you're in there doing power cleans or deadlifts, you're not training for an hour consistently. You're doing a 3-second lift every 3 minutes or something like that. Maybe you do a set of 8 or something like that. So maybe you're operating for 30 seconds. and you're taking a 3, 4, 5 minute break, and you're doing, that's not an hour of continuous activity. So you don't
No.
need the carbohydrate support for that type of activity. Certainly running a 100-meter dash, which is over in, in my case, like 14 seconds, 13, 14 seconds, not as fast as like Usain Bolt, but that certainly doesn't require carbohydrates either. And I mean, it's just like, but when you start getting beyond an hour, we're seeing that, yes, that's where you can strategically use some carbohydrates, but it's not so much about filling glycogen. It's about maintaining decent blood glucose. And then, like I said, that's what the performance data seems to be coming out now. But if you get chronically adapted to it, you can perform at a very, very high level. I mean, if you talk to guys like Stu Phillips and Don Layman, and a lot of these guys will tell you, even when it comes to muscle building, the requirements are, number one is training. Training, it trumps everything. You got to train you got to train your ass off. You got to train consistently. You got to train with the right intensity and volume. And then after that is, protein, having adequate protein. And then it's just having enough energy. And the energy can come from fat, it can come from carbohydrates. Many people prefer carbohydrates, but it's not required. I mean, I think that's a misconception. I think that, and again, for the purposes of the vast majority of the population, very few people are going to step on a bodybuilding stage. Very, 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 very few people are going to be Olympic athletes. Even high level recreation, amateur, and even some professional athletes can probably do fine with very low carbohydrates, or even in some cases none. I've seen guys on the Olympic wrestling team. I've seen guys on the Olympics as track and field athletes. I've seen professional football players, professional rugby players, professional MMA guys do it without carbohydrates. I mean, there are people that are doing this now. Maybe you don't need to, but most of these people are dealing with some sort of disease issue. Maybe they got a gut, maybe they had Crohn's disease, or maybe they had some type 1 diabetes or something that has made them want to shift that way. But nonetheless, once they adapt to it over time, like you have and I have, you can kick ass. I mean, you can perform well. And for me, and I think particularly as an aging athlete, what I find is my tolerance for carbohydrates was better in my 20s than it is in my late 50s. And so when it comes to like, am I going to train hard today in the gym? Well, if my damn groin or my knee or my back is irritated and inflamed, that's going to impact my quality of training. When I'm not consuming carbohydrates, I feel better. My joints feel better. Then I can train hard. I'm out there jumping. You guys see me. I'm out there jumping and doing depth jumps and drop jumps and broad jumps.
The plyos, dude. That's why I did the plyos. I'm loving the plyos, dude.
The plyos and doing the power cleans. Most guys our age don't do that and one of the reasons they'll say is, oh, my shoulder hurt, my back hurts, my knee hurts. Well, maybe if you stop abusing the carbohydrates and using it, in using that crutch, you might perform better, over the long term.
That's it. So let's go with inflammation. That's really, really good, because I don't think that people tend to understand that the way they're eating creates inflammation. That inflammation then really takes away quality of life, especially when you get over 40. The average American over 40 is inflamed, and he doesn't even know it. He doesn't know how bad he feels till he finally feels good, which is uninflamed. So, of course, the diet is the huge culprit for this. So all these processed foods that the average American is eating, when I remove processed foods from my clients' diets and I put whole foods in just a matter of days, the inflammation starts to leave. Talk a little bit about the processed foods and what I say, because obviously I just try to break things simple for my clients. I say, look, the food you were eating before was creating friction in the body, and that friction was creating inflammation. Now break that down in a way that obviously is a little bit, I guess, more doctor science based.
There's a number of ways we can approach it. So first of all, let's just talk about, there's been some studies done on, like, for instance, knee pain and knee arthritis, in middle-aged, older adults, and they've compared low-carb diets to low-fat diets, and they found clearly the low-carb diets did better with knee inflammation. So if you have symptomatic knee pain, knee arthritis, we already know there's studies out there to support that. We also know that high levels of insulin. So when you have really high insulin levels, often caused by eating a lot of processed, ultra-processed food, particularly ultra-processed carbohydrates, we see an increased rate of inflammatory cytokines being secreted by the joint by these things called fibroblasts-like synoviocytes. There was another study about this, came out a couple of years ago. So that when you have elevated insulin levels, the joint just starts taking on more damage. It starts becoming more damaged. We also know that, for instance, our gut is compromised by what we eat for sure. And so a lot of these ultra processed ingredients, things like emulsifiers and thickeners and things like that, we'll see like, if you go to the store and you buy some dairy product or some other product, you see this product called carrageenan in there, which and polysorbate 80 and mono and diglycerides and some of these things. These products have been shown to actually injure the gut. And once the gut is injured, it allows for foreign materials that aren't supposed to get passed into our bloodstream, and then they go on to cause downstream effects of inflammation. So by allowing your gut to normalize itself, I mean, we have to absorb something. I mean, if our gut was completely impermeable, we'd all starve to death. I mean, we have to get stuff in. And so if you think about it, our gut is actually the largest interface we have with the outside environment, because it's like we're like a donut in a way. Like that little donut hole is our mouth, esophagus, small intestine, and then outer butt, right? So that's that long tube is actually external to our body, and it's got all these little folds and ruffles, and we call microvilli, that increase the surface area. So the surface area of our gut is around the size of a tennis court. So you've got this giant surface that absorbs stuff, and then about 70% of our immune system is also in our gut, because we're always, dealing with foreign stuff coming through. So when that gut breaks down, the barrier breaks down, we start becoming more and more inflamed. And what's the biggest driver of gut breakdown is what we put in our mouth. It's what we eat. And so there is just a huge amount of data that supports that. That's related to gut dysfunction, is related to inflammation across our body, and when it affects our joints, we just don't feel good. You don't feel like training. When your knee hurts, when you got damn patella tendonitis or quad tendonitis, or your joint is inflamed, squatting heavy just doesn't seem like it's a good thing on the menu that day.
So it's kind of a chemical thing.
Yeah, as an orthopedic surgeon, I was taught it was about mechanics. When you get heavier, you're going to transmit 3-4 times your body weight through your knee, which is true. I mean, the biomechanics still hold up, but it's not so much that. I mean, there are a lot of heavy, strong guys that don't have knee arthritis, right? Even though they're heavier than the average person. There are a lot of people that put tremendous forces through their joints, Olympic weightlifters, bodybuilders, power lifters, track athletes, jumpers, gymnasts that don't destroy their joints, and their joints actually get stronger, and their cartilage actually gets thicker. We've seen that.
So going back to the beginning of that chain reaction, so the chemicals in the food, which is creating the issues in the gut, letting stuff out into the bloodstream, it's just one big chain reaction of creating inflammation, putting on weight, that leads right down to the deteriorating joints, because it's like one big chain reaction.
Yeah, basically. I mean, when as an orthopedic surgeon, the vast majority of people that came in for knee replacements were not dudes that were out there squatting heavy and jumping and sprinting, even earlier on in life. The vast majority of them are people that got fat, old women that never exercised a day in their life, that got fat, and they got 100 pounds, 60, 70, 100 pounds overweight, and they're completely sedentary. Those people, and the other thing is excess body fat is inflammatory. We have these inflammatory, what we call adipokines, which are cellular signaling molecules that the adipose tissue lets out, and it causes more inflammation. So again, losing body fat. I think, I don't know if you, John, I don't remember. There used to be this TV commercial from a cereal called Kellogg's Special K. You remember that stuff? And Kellogg's Special K was like a high protein breakfast. It's garbage. I wouldn't eat the stuff, but they had a great commercial, and they talked about. They said, hey, can you pinch more than an inch? You reach down and grab your belly. And if you could grab more than an inch of body fat, that's a real problem. And I think that's really one of the better metrics, rather than we're focusing on BMI and all this other stuff. Just if you can reach down and grab a big old hunk of belly fat, that's a problem. You got to fix it. That's leading to your achy joints. It's leading to your erectile dysfunction, your heart disease, your diabetes, your cancer, your dementia risk. So you got to get that belly fat off.
Yeah. and that's obviously, carrying lots of body fat, it is a whole host of problems, when it comes to, but I guess what comes down to, and that's really the end result of the average American lifestyle at this point, and our whole conversation started off, with cholesterol, and it's almost like we're we're being coached by the medical field to be focusing on things that almost don't matter, as all these other things continue to lead us down the wrong path of being more unhealthy and more fat.
Yeah, I think that, from my perspective, how would I define health? I would define health of having the functional capacity, the physical capacity to do what I could do when I was young and healthy. I mean, and so, it's like as we get older and older, I mean, we're kids, imagine when you're like a 10-year-old kid running around a playground, you could jump off the ground, run a sprint, you could swing from the monkey bars, climb a tree, jump out of the tree, roll around in the ground, do all this stuff. And then you could contrast that to the typical 70, 80-year-old. And what can they do? They can walk around a little bit. That's all they can do. They're not jumping. They're certainly not doing backflips and somersaults, and they're not doing heavy power cleans. I mean, that just ain't happening. And as we lose that capacity, as that gets narrower and narrower, and eventually all we can do is, lay in bed and get our diaper changed, and then we're dead. So we want to preserve that as long as possible. That to me is what being healthy is, what health is about. Yeah. And it's not just, some number of, lab values, or, a lot of people are talking about, we're going to talk about our DNA clock and DNA methylation and telomere length and all that crap. None of that really is. We don't even know. We don't really know. There's people that make it sound like that's the Holy Grail. In my view, the Holy Grail is function. I mean, I think if you've got these, if you want to be a longevity guru, and I don't espouse to do that, because I think it's a bunch of nonsense, quite honestly. But I do talk to people about functioning better, not being diseased, and being able to get after it. And that's what life is about.
Well, that is longevity. But it just doesn't have this fancy title. You're just helping. If you have good function, you're going to have good longevity, correct?
Well, you're going to have a better health span for sure. You're going to have a better quality of life. Now, if maybe you could live, because I get people out there, they'll see me doing a heavy deadlift or a heavy power clean or jumping. They'll say, "Oh, you shouldn't be doing that in your 50s, man. Oh, you got to stop that."
God. And
I look at them, and I'm like, well, you number one, you probably got picked last on the playground because no one wanted to team. And the other thing is, like, it's such bullshit. I mean, honestly, there is so much data out there that shows that being strong, being active, being physically fit, being an athlete later in life increases longevity across the board. It decreases all kinds of disease. And so there's people that say, you just need to age gracefully and sit on the porch and watch the sunset. I'm like, F that. I mean, I'd rather be, quite frankly, I'd rather be dead at that point. If I can't get up and do stuff,
if we're not kicking ass, what are we doing?
Exactly right. Yeah. And there's no reason you can't. I mean, and it's like, well, the only reason you can do that is because you were doing it when you're younger. And that's true. I mean, I've been training now consistently for over 45 years, since I was a 13-year-old kid when I first started lifting, and now I'm 58. So I got 45 years of training. Yeah. I've never been hurt. I've been, I push my body, but there's, your body. Like people say, "Oh my God, why are you lifting that much weight?" Because I could lift more than that, and this is easy.
This is a challenge, but this is safe.
Yeah, I mean, it's with them, and lifting weights is one of the safer activities out there. Quite honestly, when you look at all the sports that you could be playing, there's a lot less injuries in lifting, and particularly bodybuilding. And I'm not a bodybuilder by any stretch, but I anytime somebody starts to say, and this has been, I can remember when I was in my 20s, wait till you get 30, wait till you're 30, you're not gonna be able to, wait till you're 40, wait till you're 50, and now it's like, wait till you're 70. I'm like, okay, whatever. I'm gonna be going, I'm gonna keep going, God willing, and I'm still around. I'm gonna be going just as hard at 70 as I am at 58 and as I was at my 40s. I'm sure you got the same mindset.
Absolutely,
no doubt.
We clicked on that from right when we met years ago. I love it. So, Doc, I got one more question for you, because obviously we want to make sure we're respectful of your time. Before everybody, just so everybody knows, when Doc got on here before we started recording, he said this is his third podcast of the day. So he's a busy man.
I have not even had a steak yet today. I got to eat a steak.
That's it. So the whole conversation started up about cholesterol. It's so misunderstood. So if you could just, as we wrap this baby up, kind of summarize cholesterol, make it, do like a quick synopsis for the average person who's so misled with cholesterol. Just give them a quick snapshot on a better way to understand or look at cholesterol from a standpoint of just, here's the best that we know. This is information, the best we know, not trying to sell medicine or not influenced by anything other than the best that we know.
Yeah. I would say that I don't think you can make blanket statements around cholesterol. We shouldn't say that all high cholesterol is always bad, and we shouldn't say that it's always more advantageous to lower cholesterol. I think there are people that will make that argument. However, you shouldn't ignore high cholesterol either. If you have high cholesterol, I would look at a holistic picture of your whole, health outcome. If you have high cholesterol and you are also metabolically sick, overweight, obese, pre-diabetic, hypertension, inflamed, then you need to address all of those issues. Probably the other ones more so than the cholesterol. If, you're over age 40, I would strongly encourage everybody to go get imaged. Go get a CAC score. I mean, it costs you $100, $150 most, but you don't even need a doctor to do it. Just get a baseline so you know what you're starting with.
Yeah.
I think that, we have to understand that cholesterol is very nuanced. We don't ignore it, but we don't hyper focus on it either. I think, it's one part of the equation that for some people it is almost irrelevant. For other people, it is a significant risk factor. And so I think you have to figure out who those people are. I think the people that are particularly that are metabolically unhealthy, you need to address it. If you got too much belly fat, get rid of it. If you're not metabolically healthy, if you're diabetic, pre-diabetic, overweight, hypertension, you got to fix all that stuff. Those things are fixable without medications in many instances. Those things are fixable by proper sleep, nutrition, exercise, activity, stress management, light, circadian balance, day-night cycle, respecting all those things. So I would say that don't just accept, if you go to the doctor's office and your cholesterol is high and he says, here, let's put you on this drug for the rest of your life. That is insane. That is literally insanity.
Yeah.
I can change my cholesterol 200 points in under 24 hours, and I've done it just on fasting and exercise and that type of stuff. So it's a very dynamic number. You would be absolutely insane to make lifelong decisions based on a single lab test. I would delve into that if you're curious about that. You might. There's a website called the cholesterolcode.com, which has some really interesting state-of-the-art recent data, some of the most recent data on this stuff. So I would go check that out. But again, don't focus on one lab number. Focus on what you can do, how you feel, how you perform, what you look like. That's the true meaning of health, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay. Well, that's great information, Doc. I tell you, every time we get a chance to talk, I find myself, taking notes and writing shit down. As you see me look down, I got a whole paper of notes here because, every time we talk, it seems like, it's just, I have a great time listening to talks. It's always got something new for me to digest. And, I guess when it comes down to it, I just want to say thank you. I appreciate for what you do for helping people in the industry and everything else just have a better perspective on the way things should be, rather than just the way that the medical field is jamming this stuff down our throats. So I personally want to say thank you. And I'm honored to know you and done multiple shows like this, and I'm sure we'll do many in the future. So that being said, thank you. But how do people find you? We're going to put all your contacts in the notes, but let everybody know if they want to find you. What's the easiest way to find Dr. Baker?
Yeah, and one thing I will comment on is, there are clear problems with the healthcare system in the U.S. We have a disease management model. We have a sick care system. And as much as many of us have complained about it and recognize it as a problem, I'm trying to do something about it. We have a company, Revero. If you have metabolic disease, if you have inflammatory disease, autoimmune conditions, obesity, diabetes, check us out, revero.com, revero.com. We will pair you with a physician licensed in all 50 states. We'll have given an entire health team that will be dedicated to taking care of you on a daily basis to help you get healthy. Outside of that, revero.com. I'm on social media, on Instagram, Shawn Baker 1967. That's SHAWN. Sorry, Baker, BAKER 1967. I'm on YouTube, Shawn Baker MD. I'm on, what's the other ones? X at SBakerMD, and TikTok and Facebook, Shawn Baker MD. So there we go.
Well, I'll tell you, I appreciate your time, Doc. And everybody, for someone who's really put an effort into making a good, proper movement for health, you're looking at him right here. As you just described his company and all the things that he does to stay involved, to help really help people understand how to do it right. And again, I want to thank you again for your time, Doc. It's always great to see you. And like I said, we're going to promote what you're doing. I'm always talking about you. And I can't tell you how many times I've told people, you just got to go listen to this guy talk.
Right.
He's going to open stuff up. He's going to help you open up a dimension you didn't know was there. What were you going to say, Doc?
Well, no, I was going to say, I appreciate that, John. And, like I said, I think we just have to view health through a little bit of a different lens than we used to.
Yeah. I got, honestly, I'm going to go on another tangent again. So I got to let you go, but I appreciate you, brother. We're going to definitely make sure that people keep coming your way and check out your movements. And that being said, everyone, Dr. Shawn Baker, thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.